Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Azure OpenAI Services. My name is Bianca. I'm a marketing consultant at Windwire Technologies, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Today's topic, game-changing Azure OpenAI solutions that work with your enterprise data. In the next 45 minutes, we will discuss details on architecture patterns and solution approaches for developing secure and scalable solutions on Azure OpenAI services that work well with enterprise data. Before we start, let me highlight a few housekeeping items. During the webinar, please feel free to post questions, and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end. This session is being recorded and will be shared with you in the next 24 to 48 hours. I'm delighted to introduce you to today's session speakers. Vineet Arora. Vineet is the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Windwire. Windwire is a managed Microsoft partner that specializes in IT services dedicated to the Microsoft platform with a primary focus on data, AI, and app development. He brings over 25 years of experience to his role, including a stint at Microsoft Consulting Services, where he served as a consultant and a senior architect for several years. Over the past few months, a significant focus area for Vineet has been generative AI-based solutions. He leads a series of virtual events published on Windwire called the CTO Tech Talk series, where he discusses emerging technologies such as generative AI, the latest innovations on the Microsoft platform, and how they will be applied to drive business outcomes. He brings in real-life experiences on how enterprise can leverage Azure OpenAI services to drive innovation and growth in transforming the healthcare industry. Our other speaker is Dhanshree Moore, who is a principal cloud solutions architect at Microsoft. She is a deep learning enthusiast with professional experience in data science and machine learning. At Microsoft, she is responsible for driving high-priority customer initiatives on Azure data and AI platform, providing end-to-end technical guidance and expertise to accelerate healthcare customers' digital transformation journey. Welcome, Vineet and Dhanshree.
Thank you, Bianca. Thanks, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to folks who are joining. I see a few people are still joining. Maybe we'll give it a minute for folks to join in, and then Dhanshree, you want to say hello and you can get started. Bianca, thank you very much for the introductions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Bianca. Super excited to be here. We have a couple exciting news to share and solution pattern. I know doing OpenAI on top of your data is like top of the mind for everyone. So we'll definitely go in details of this. Vineet, let me know when we can get started.
Yeah, I see people are still joining in. Maybe we should give it a few seconds.
Okay, while people are joining, we'll just go through the agenda for today.
Yep.
So the first topic is Azure OpenAI on your enterprise. This is the public preview feature that we release for Azure OpenAI service. Then we'll go through the solution approach and blueprint, and we'll go a little bit deeper on the knowledge fusion, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. Also, feel free to ask any question on the chat. So if whenever we see the relevant pause, we'll take that question. So I would love to have this session as interactive as possible. Okay,
yeah,
so
I see that some people may be having issues. If you're not able to hear, I think you won't be able to get my instructions anyways, but it'll be good to rejoin, which our moderator is putting it on the chat anyways. Yeah, I think Dhanshree, we can get started. This is being recorded, so people who will probably join late can always go through the initial recording.
All right, sounds good. So we'll first go over what all is out there, just part of the pure vanilla Azure Machine Learning, Azure OpenAI service. So these models, like including GPT-3, Ada, Babbage, DaVinci, Query, Codex models, DALL-E, ChatGPT, which is GPT-3.5 Turbo, and GPT-4 models. So you get all these different models as part of Azure OpenAI service. The features that we added recently is deploy on your own data. So you do not need to retrain that model. That means like, change the weights and biases for that model, but you can utilize the power of this large language model on top of your organization data repository. And I will go a little bit deeper in this in a minute. But two other updates that I want to provide is we are also bringing this provision throughput skills. What it provide you is you can now allocate the dedicated compute to any of these model deployment. So for an example, you have multiple teams who are doing multiple projects for different business unit. Let's say one team deployed GPT-3, another deployed GPT-4. You want to specify how many tokens per minute that you want to dedicate to, like, let's say these two different projects or two different business units, or even like multiple of them. So that is something that you will be able to provide with this provision throughput. Now you will have that dedicated compute, and that will give you that dedicated latency and tokens per minute, transaction per minute, that you can assign to multiple different deployments. And the third thing that we are bringing is this plugin approach for Azure OpenAI service. Uh, what it will give you is, let's say there are plugins for Bing, SQL, Cosmos DB, as well as Azure Cognitive Search. So you know that these model, OpenAI based model, they are trained a little bit in the past, a year or 2 year back. So they may not have the most recent knowledge, and that is where you can actually utilize plugins like Bing plugin, which can give you the latest information from public internet, augment that within your OpenAI model, and now your OpenAI model is also aware about the latest that is coming from the public internet. And so it's true, let's say if you want to incorporate some of your uh, data that is stored in your SQL databases, or if you already have that index information in cognitive source, you can use that as a plugin on top of this Azure OpenAI service. So I want to go a little bit deeper on, how you deploy on your own data. And before that, this is the important concept to understand, like how you will not fine tune the model, but you can still utilize all the power of large language model on your data. And the pattern is known as RAG pattern, retrieval augmented generation pattern. So what happened behind the scene in this retrieval augmented generation pattern is whenever user asks any query, first large language model translate that query into what it should be searching in this cognitive search, where you have all your knowledge repository already indexed and kept within that search pipeline itself. Then it cognitive search return the response based on the query, and that response, that is basically your retrieval step. That retrieve information then get augmented as a context to the large language model, in this case, let's say GPT-3 or GPT-4 models. And it look at your query, it look at the data that's sent as the context, and based on the query, it generate the response. And it then send that response back. That means it is doing that generation based on the retrieve information. And this is like the most important pattern, I'll say, when you are actually trying to build that OpenAI on top of your own data. So what we're bringing as part of the feature, previously before this feature, you need to create, let's say, your own search pipeline, create that RAG pattern, and then utilize it for your data. Now we are actually simplifying this approach with this feature. So now you can actually directly connect or ingest your data, no matter where your data live or what format it is. You can ingest document file, text files, HTML, PDFs. The data can be either directly stored on the blob storage, or you can also upload the data from your local devices. Or let's say you can also already create the cognitive search pipeline use other AI services that we have as part of the orchestration for that search pipeline. So, your search power pipeline itself become much more powerful. And if you look at the RAG pattern, that retrieval is also like the most important step, because like whatever it retrieve, that goes as a context to the large language model. So you may choose to like build your own pipeline and then use that pipeline in this ingest for this feature on your own data feature. So that is just the first step. Then we are also giving you the grounding logic chunking. You can also fine tune the prompts as well as give certain personality to that assistant. So you can say, be friendly or be professional, be very precise, ground the data only on your data repository and do not answer anything from your own knowledge base. So you can add these type of prompts and like make it much more relevant, personalized for your business scenarios. So another couple things that we are giving out of the box is you can directly upload the document, and we will go ahead and we will um, create the index, and then like index all that data, store it on the cognitive search pipeline, and then serve it. You can also enable semantic search. So instead of the just the traditional search, you the model can now understand the semantic of that query, and then it will give you the result out. You can also enable vector search. So there is another feature from OpenAI where you can actually do the embedding. So embedding is nothing but vector representation in multi-dimensional space for your, let's say, the text information that you provided. Um, what we have seen is the hybrid approach, like enabling the semantic search as well as the vector embedding search. The hybrid approach gives you much more better experience than like just one standalone. So you can actually mix and match some of these approach and see which one is better for your scenario. And then you can personalize the UI for the application, as well as you can apply some of your company policy, like give the role-based access control or add furthermore information based on like who is logging in. So they don't need to provide all that information to your virtual assistant. And the last one for this feature is we are also giving you that ability to integrate this feature as part of the APIs or SDK, as well as it will give you the web app that you can further customize again based on your organization need. So you can use that to share what you have built with your customers or like someone inside the organization. Again, you are in total control of like how this front end look like and how the security around this front end app can be. So a couple things that I want to just discuss is this solution pattern. Like this is at very high level how this will look like. So here on the right hand side you have all your data. Let it be like Word, PDF, or your data is stored in like structure format on SQL database, or you have NoSQL database stored in Cosmos DB. All this data can be connected to cognitive search. Cognitive search will go into these data sources. If required, it will understand, oh, like this is the HTML file format, it is JSON file format. It will crack upon that document and extract that information. Then whenever on the front end side, when our user is asking any query, OpenAI first look into that query, it try to find what it should search in that retrieval phase in this cognitive search. Then cognitive search look into your data sources, retrieve that information, send that information back to Azure OpenAI as a context, as like in that augmentation phase, and then OpenAI generate the response and provide that response back to the front end, like it may be the app, or you already have the app and you're just using the REST endpoints to get that generated response back into your already existing like front end app or so on. So that is at very high level architecture for this doing OpenAI on your enterprise data. Vinith will actually go and like furthermore deeper into this solution architecture. Before I do the demo, I just want to call out a couple things. your data is your data. Microsoft do not use this data. It doesn't go out of the subscription. Even OpenAI cannot use this data for any, let's say, further fine tuning or enhancement. The data that you store, it is encrypted, and you can also give, let's say, role-based access controls, or you can set the private virtual network boundaries. So you can give the private endpoints to the storage location as well as Azure OpenAI, or any other services that you are using on Azure, so that you can be assured that this data will never leave uh, your networking boundaries. And as I mentioned, like, you can always encrypt that data with your own customer managed keys. So these are all the different settings that are available to protect your data. And by the way, we are also been through all these most comprehensive enterprise compliances and security. So out of the box, this OpenAI service is SOC, ISO, HIPAA, and many other compliant. So one thing is, when I say compliant, there is also responsibility on customer side to make sure utilize all these different toolkits that we are providing to secure your data. Use those so that your solution will become compliant for, let's say, HIPAA and so on. So with that, I will do the demo, but I will take a quick pause to see if there are any questions so far.
Absolutely. So if you haven't already and you have any questions for Dhanshri, please make sure to put those questions into the Q&A chat box. I do have a couple that came in, Dhanshri. So the first one is, can you explain how I can ground the OpenAI on my SQL database and Cosmos database?
Yes, sure. So this is let me just flip back to the solution pattern that I was showing here. So let's say you have a lot of structured data that is stored on SQL, and you have unstructured data stored on NoSQL database. Cognitive search can give you that ability to connect to your data that is stored on your, like your databases here. So it has like a default connectors to connect to that data. And the default connector also have understanding, oh, like, this is your table and this is the table structure, and, kind of the metadata about that data. Uh, so this is already like kind of, that come as out of the box functionality as part of this cognitive search. Now, cognitive search, like go into that database, it understand, oh, like, I have employee table, and then I have these many employees, and, like all other information that is stored on your database. Cognitive search go in that data, it will create the kind of inverted index. So it will index all the data that is available on your databases, keep it indexed. So whenever this pattern send any query to cognitive search will then do like BAM25, and there are like other enhanced models out there, again, that come as pre-baked within the service itself. So with that, it will look up into that index, and then it will find that information based on the data that is stored on your databases, then send that data back to OpenAI, so that that goes as context. Now that with that context, then OpenAI will look at that context. Let's say I was asking about, like, okay, what will be my revenue in Q1. So it looked at that, revenue data, historical data, and it found like, oh, like, I have this prediction column there, and then, like, it can formulate that answer and then provide you the very crisp, like, human-like response back to the user. So that is how you can actually utilize this for databases as well. Any other question, Bianca?
Absolutely. We have more questions coming in. From Sina, we have, can we ingest jar, war, and code packages? Also, does it support secure connections to sources like Confluence and Jira?
Okay, so the preview feature doesn't support jar war at this moment, but we do have this. We released this GitHub repository. Like, this is the repository that we use to create that feature. So you can actually kind of deploy your own repository, and then you can give those files and just like create the connectors to cognitive source and then utilize this pattern. So that is something that you can build and use on top of this pattern. This will act as the solution accelerator in that case. Whereas again, out of the box, it support all other like document file format, like more generic ones like text, HTML, JSON, PDF, Word, those type of document at this moment. But I will add that as a feedback to our product group. That's a good question.
Okay, great.
Okay, so just in
Um,
interest of time, I'm
Yep.
going to I'm going to do like a quick demo, so we can take other questions at the end of the session as well. So what is happening in this demo is I'm pointing to the data repository where I have all the benefit plans, HR type of documents. So I'm going to ask like a simple question: what is included in my Northwind Health Plus plan that is not included in standard? So it used that RAG pattern, it generated that response back, and also note that you are also getting the citation. So like where OpenAI is generating this answer from. And in many healthcare scenario, this is like super important to really understand the source of truth, or even like kind of cross check it as well. So here you can see like the question was about the comparison, so it is pointing me to like the right page of the documentation to get further more information. So I already asked a couple more questions here. So I have plus plan, does it cover eye exam? And it generated that information along with the citation. I asked the follow-up question, how about hearing? So just note, like just this question, how about hearing, doesn't mean anything without the context. But because this solution is session aware, it understands, oh, I was talking about the plus plan and I was talking about the coverage. So this must be like hearing coverage for the plus plan. So then again, it went in, it retrieved that information and then generated information with your detailed information. And you can also go to the citation to cross check the ground truth, like where this data is coming from. And there are some yeah, here you can see like the citation where this data is coming from. You can also look at all the supporting document that is that came as an output from that source pipeline. And you can also look at the thought process. So here you can see like why it is able to understand that context is because like the conversation history actually went in as input. Like it knows like previously asked for the uh, plan comparison and then the plus plan and then the eye coverage. So that is the reason like now this is about the coverage for hearing. So like you can also look at the prompt and even learn a little bit from the prompt, because prompt engineering is like one of the top skill to have nowadays. It's plain English, but it's like it sometimes takes some experimentation. So here you can like kind of see how we are setting up the system message. So when you are building your own, you can actually kind of get some ideas from these prompts as well. Okay, so with that, that's the demo for how you can utilize Azure OpenAI on your data feature for your enterprise data repository. And I will hand it over to Vineet to go in further detail.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dhanashree. I'll start sharing my screens. I believe there is a question about the Git repo. I think as Dhanashree is coming out of
I will send that.
yeah, she'll put it in the chat window that all of you can view that. Folks, thank you very much again for joining. Tanushree did a good job in giving you from the Microsoft perspective what the platform is. As I saw a couple of queries also, what I'm going to cover is get into the next level of details and cover two aspects, like how do you actually go up setting up all this environment and everything else, and then of course wrap up with an actual solution that we have built at Winwire that is more like a solution accelerator, which enables this particular scenario. One of the first things that I want to sort of talk to everyone about it is I saw a question, and you may or may not be aware of how Azure plus OpenAI work together. I would recommend you to, keep your phone cameras ready and, scan this particular barcode. What you will end up with is this particular page. This is a page that Microsoft provides to get you the access to the OpenAI services. Basically, what Microsoft is doing is allowing the partnership between OpenAI and Microsoft to host the OpenAI and services on Azure. So I'll just show you an example. This is an Azure portal that I have. And this is an OpenAI resource, Azure OpenAI resource that I have hosted. What this basically means is that if I go to, and then, this is just a resource. If you are familiar with Azure, you can actually go to what is provided as the AI Studio, and I'll be doing most of the demos out here. And you will be able to deploy instances of those models that you hear about, so GPT-4, GPT 3.5, and others. Right, there are in fact lots of models. For this demo, I've hosted 3 of them that I'll be showing. But you have all these different models, and what this is doing is it's creating an instance or a reference to that model's capabilities in your Azure environment. So you are working, I'm logged in, I have a particular resource, I'm in my directory, if you see out here, and then I'm making sure that this is the only resource that I'm using. And anything that I do and build solutions leveraging the capabilities of these models will remain in my Azure environment, in your Azure environment. So that's the important thing. Then she, sort of touched upon quotas. These are newer features that you can do. You can start allocating quotas for each of those models. So basically, you are in a lot of control, right, where these models are deployed in your scenario. And Bianca, our moderator, will keep on monitoring the chat. I'm not able to see that to know that if there are other questions, I'll be able to take them and answer them. Let me go back to the deck and show you some of the steps that we need to follow. So as I was talking about, no, I'm not on the deck. You can get access to OpenAI services. There was a presumption on our part that when you're coming to this webinar, we are not covering some of that basics, but I'm happy to provide that information. How do you actually go about it? I'm just going to show you some steps on the slide for reference later also, but then I will actually show you the demo also. So the first and the foremost is, as many organizations have content stored on different places, the simplest way is to have, for your experimentation purposes, to get your POCs or pilots built, upload documents into a blob storage in Azure, or you may already have one which has a lot of contents. That's the first step that you do. Once you have done that, right, you have uploaded these to the storage, we will need to also have an enterprise search. Now, this is the connectivity that Microsoft has provided, and I'll show you different options where you can have a cognitive search, which is again an Azure service that helps index those documents. And that's how it is going to provide the capability for you to be able to query your documents on top of it. But OpenAI is very much, and I'll show you the architecture on how it works, that will be working on top of this particular information. Once you have done all this basic setup, you can actually experiment this in what is called the playground, the one that I was showing you, Azure AI Studio, or actually you can even go ahead and deploy a base application that will be available for you to start, actually testing it against your data. And I'll show you that in the demo. I think there was a query about the GitHub repo. I'm also putting the URL out here. It's all using OpenAI APIs, the connectivity to the enterprise search and everything else. And the repo is already there. That creates an application. You can actually make it private. You can bring it in-house and build your own solutions. Now, the important part to note it is that this is not a public UI that you will see. You will need to, because you're deploying it in your Azure environment, you will need to get it authenticated against your Azure AD credentials. That is very, very important. And then, of course, you can do the customization, and I'll show you an example of what that customization could look like. So I've kept these screens just for the sake of, demo gods not being happy on me. I'm just going to show you the actual demo. As I said, what you have to do is once you have access to the Azure OpenAI services, you would have deployed it in the environment. You will get something like this called Azure AI Studio. This is your environment where you work with everything to do with the OpenAI service that you've deployed. What Microsoft provides is a chat playground and completion playground, and I'm not going to be able to cover all of that in this webinar, but it's pretty easy for you to figure it out once you go through that on how you can work with this environment. The feature that we are talking about, the recently added feature, is add your data, right? This is in preview mode, but this is the very, very important one. Before I go ahead with this, let me again talk about what I showed on the slide. I have this storage account, and in this storage account, I have a blob container where I have uploaded, the similar document that the end results that Dhanshri was showing you, benefits of documents, a lot of documents that I have uploaded. These are only for demo purposes. As you know, you could create a blank storage account, upload your documents. It will remain in your Azure environment only. And then in addition, I also have a cognitive search service deployed, which actually right now does not have any index, right? So you'll see there are no indexes out here. You could potentially use an existing enterprise search if you have been using it for quite some time. But if not, you can, of course, create a blank one, and then we can work through that itself. I'll go back to the studio. And the mechanism in which you work through this is once you start add data source, this is where there are three options available to you. And I'll quickly cover two of them and then go a little bit more deeper into the third one. As I said, you may have a cognitive search environment already existing in your organization, right? And you could actually work through that. So if I choose that same one, and as you know, there is no index on that, it can't really use that, right? Because without the index, there is no point in it. But you may have one, and I have a bunch of others that I can just point to just to show you that it'll you can point to that particular index, and that would be as easy as it is. And this is for organizations who have been working with cognitive search for quite some time. There's also an option to dynamically upload documents in real time. Again, from a experimentation perspective, I have this, the same this one that I showed you, the storage account, right? I could connect to that storage account and work through uploading the documents in real time. Or because in this case, I have already uploaded the documents in that, I'm just going to choose the second option, which is Azure Blob Storage, and show you the entire demo on how it goes through. So I will choose that Blob Storage. It knows that there are these different containers. And then I will say enterprise search. I could actually create a new search resource if you wanted right from here. And I will say this is webinar demo. And people who are familiar with cognitive search, you know that you have various ways to create indexes, right? There was a question, so I opened this additional tab. If you are in that same enterprise document search, you actually have lots of information that you can use as the data sources, right? So if you want to have the same kind of a capability work upon your structured data on your SQL or on your Cosmos DB or anything else, or even SharePoint sites that you have, right? These are already available, and the cognitive search becomes that heart of the matter to connect your data and index the data, but it doesn't really do much on top of it. OpenAI services that I'll talk about will do the additional stuff on top of it. So as I sort of go through this, what it will do is it will take these documents, right, that I showed you here, stored in this storage account. In this particular case, right, I showed you the option you could upload the documents. Here I can continue to upload more documents if I want, right? Or if I would have created an enterprise search which had the index from MySQL, my Cosmos DB, right? That's where you're working through that, right? So you will see it created this index in real time. I'm just going to refresh it. It'll take a few minutes to bring all those documents, store them in this particular index document, and you'll be able to make sense of it once I show you the architecture diagram. What you're able to do at this point in time, once this step completes, is this environment that is available to you on the right side, right, is the chat environment, and you can do similar queries, right, that you can do only on your enterprise data that you have uploaded. And this small checkbox is very important, right? Limit responses to your data content. Basically, you're telling this entire OpenAI activity, this is the OpenAI interface, to limit the information, right, only to the documents that you have uploaded and not to all the other rest of the world information that it knows about, right? So as I showed you, webinar demo gets created. We'll go here, have a look at that. It'll take a few seconds. It'll showing 0 documents. It's indexing. So once till the time it's indexing, what I will also do is, right, I can have this chat interface here, interact with it, but how do you actually get started on building this as an enterprise application? What you will see on the right side top is a deploy to. What this is an application that gets created under your Azure Active Directory authentication enabled, right? And as you say, it's 10 minutes, so I'll actually go ahead and actually get created. Webinar demo app. Have Azure. Oops. I'm just going to choose, oops, sorry, wrong one. I'm just going to choose this for a second. I'm going to choose, let's say, East US, and maybe choose a pricing plan. If again, these are all basics of creating a web app and an app service and everything else. And what I will do is it'll deploy this app, right? Oh, okay. I may have already done that so let's just do 2. It means the previous one worked, right, as I was explaining. So what, as I said, it does is it takes all this setup configuration that you have done, it picks up the environment that you saw in the GitHub repo, right, and creates a web app for you that you are able to customize. Now, as I said, it will take a few minutes to do this so that I can cover some of the other concepts that we want to cover, and we will come back and show you that. So as you saw, the index now is stored with 261 documents, just sample documents, right, which you can now chat against here itself. Right? So I can ask for iBenefits, and now it is going through the same UI that you saw Dhanshri talked about, right? And it's working through this. I've done it in real time. I couldn't have asked this beforehand because it didn't have access to any of this, and it's providing me access to those 2 documents where actually this particular information has come in from, right? While this application is going through deployment, as I said, it'll take a few seconds. I'll show you that. Let me go back to the slide deck and walk you through again what we just covered, right? So we added a data source. There were multiple options. I showed you a data source which actually shows in real time. I'm able to connect to a blob storage. I'm able to configure an index on a enterprise document search. That's what it created. And the name was different in the demo that I did. These are all from the previous tries. And then you are able to deploy a web app, right, using whichever the source group, whichever location you want to work through that. And then, of course, this screenshot is what is going to come up once the application is deployed. And then you will be able to launch that web app. Once that web app is there, right, then you can customize the look and feel of that. But before that, as I said, when you will access it for the first time, you will be working in your Azure environment. So you're not creating a public website or anything else. you are going to be authenticating it against your Active Directory. So in this case, it's the winwire.com Active Directory. So I provided the permissions so that any of the Winwire employees who are part of that can access that, and then you will get the same UI that you saw, similar to that that Dhanshri was showing, is the end result that you actually get, and the same kind of examples that you get. Now, this is bare minimum, right? This is a basic app that you get. But what is the sort of the possibilities of working this into an enterprise solution? At Winwire, what we have worked upon is what we have published as a solution accelerator, what we call as knowledge fusion. This is built on top of a couple of solution accelerators that we have already had. But the problem that we are trying to solve, again, out here is that you need an intuitive user interface to work with the plethora of information that you have stored, where indexing can do only so much, but you will need to have a lot more OpenAI related insights provided to it. So this is just one sort of line explanation of what knowledge fusion is. We can get internal or even external data sources if you want, build those, create the metadata, classify those, and build some machine learning algorithms on top of it using OpenAI services and provide that kind of a chat interface, not a search interface, right? So if you search, you get a bunch of links. You're providing a chat interface, which is the new intuitive interface. And as I showed you, I just, again, always like to keep a screenshot of something. You could link it to your structured content also in the indexing, that index that you're creating. You could have multiple indexes in this particular search. That's absolutely fine. But what does the architecture look like? Right? This is probably the most important slide out of the whole session. That if you can take through it, we'll share the recording with you or take screenshots. That's fine. Danshri showed you a high-level pattern of how this information, how this particular solution works. I showed you the exact setup of the blob. You could even have other unstructured data. I'm not showing you, but you could have, as I said, structured data coming in, enriching that. This is a cognitive search. And then what we have done is built more interfaces on top of this cognitive search, leveraging OpenAI APIs, where we can summarize those results. We manage the prompts behind the scene, and we provide some recommendations and also save all this thing as a history, as you will see in the demo that I'll show you for the Knowledge Fusion application. And this is a solution accelerator that you can get started with. So what I just showed you till now as a demo is an experimentation environment that you can work today on your environment. But if you were to look at a full-fledged application, this is what that application could potentially look like. This is, again, very generic, without any industry or without any particular company's focus. But this is what we have built and deployed as a solution accelerator, where we can provide the ability to ask questions, right? And this, you will see, is much better than what you will get out of the box, right? It's still a similar capability of being able to ask a question, get a summarized result, get some citations, right? And as I showed you, what was there, but also provide some follow-up questions, right? So you're basically helping guide the users. And then you have your typical filters that are available in any enterprise search kind of capabilities. This is the chat history I was talking about, which is maintained as a part of our framework that we work upon. You could go into the typical UI of, yeah, these are the documents that actually came through and what are the tags associated with that. Maybe I want to refer to each of the document. I could actually, look into the actual document in more detail as is possible in a typical search environment. But you are staying in your enterprise data and working still in a very chat interface using those OpenAI capabilities, and you can have different kinds of questions, right? So this is not expense report related question, very similar kind of an output, but the system knows that you're trying to get some information. Maybe a template is going to be helpful to you. Maybe expense reported guidelines are going to be helpful to you. Maybe you want to ask about IT systems. And in this case, the idea is that it's not only documents PDF, it could be videos that you could be citing from, because the indexing, the OpenAI is actually services is actually working through all kind of unstructured data and bringing them all together. Could be documents, images, videos, and as I said, even structured data that you may be looking at, different kinds of content that is possible. Let's go back and see if our application has, yep, it seems like it has been deployed. So once it is deployed, it shows you this UI, launch web app. Again, I will try this and it may or may not come up. Again, it takes a few seconds. It's all happening behind the scene. You will get this message, and this is absolutely normal. It's not an error or anything else. What we can do is, Bianca, while this is coming up, it will take a couple of more minutes probably. We can take any questions that have come up, because I'm more or less done with the demo part that we had planned to show. We
Okay.
can take some questions and answer that. And I'll leave this slide up for folks who are looking at Knowledge Fusion, the third option that you see out here. This is, as I said, solution accelerator that we have published. We also provide you, if you're in the early stages of evaluating Azure OpenAI Services, advisory services, helping you think through a solution where we provide envisioning services. We'll be more than happy to engage with you along with Microsoft experts to help you. How do you implement this in your environment?
Great. Thank you so much for submitting your questions. If you haven't already, please type them into the chat box and we'll get to them before the end of the session. The first question we have that came in is, can existing .NET applications use any of these OpenAI services, or do they need to be developed again?
That is a very good question, because yes, I'm showing you a scenario where you're actually creating a new application altogether, and which is Python based. But the APIs that Azure OpenAI Services provide can absolutely be called in from any application, even if an existing application, right? And those are Azure OpenAI Services. Let me go back to this scenario. So essentially, sorry, I'm lost a little bit. Where am I apologize. Just give me 1 second. I will go to the OpenAI service that I was showing you. That is there. So this is the Azure OpenAI service that is available. And this will have your keys and endpoints. So this is the endpoint that could be called from any particular, .NET application or even other applications, and it'll be like you're calling another API. Behind the scene, yes, there is all documentation available on which model you want to use. For example, I have deployed in this particular case multiple models that I showed you. So there are 3 models that are deployed. You need to provide which model you're using and certain other parameters that are typical for working with these, that you can actually work with it, and then sort of pass the prompt, get the output, and then work the way you would like to work upon it. Hopefully that answers. Otherwise, if not, please reach out. We can do a follow-up on and clarify any of the points also.
Great. We have another question from Shital. She writes, does OpenAI provides options to integrate to an external public website, say US property website, as a data source where there can be millions of documents?
That is absolutely a capability that is coming up. I think Dhanshri talked about that briefly. What you will see, which we are not covering in this session, that is actually one of the topics that we are going to be covering in the upcoming webinar, is an ability to use plugins. Ability to use plugins specific to a particular source that OpenAI services can use to index and document, right? You could potentially, as I was showing you, create an index out here itself for those documents. But if not, right, what if you don't want to work through the cognitive search environment, you will go through the route of the plugins, where plugins can actually connect to that particular site and be one of the data sources that OpenAI services can work upon. Danshri, I don't know if you have any comment to add to that. That I believe is an upcoming feature and functionality in Azure OpenAI service.
Yes, that is correct. Along with the option that you mentioned, which is like, use Bing API, Bing will take care of all the indexing on that if it is public facing website. So all you have to say is like, enable that Bing plugin, and there you go. Like you don't need to do extra work. But yes, you do have like multiple options available based on your scenario.
Great.
Right. We have one more question.
So before we go to the question, I think this thing got enabled. So as you saw, the authentication has now been set up by the system behind the scene. It's the same thing that I showed you comes up. First time I have to consent it on behalf of the organization. I have the admin access, so I can do that. And what it will do is basically now go through an authentication. It's logging me in, and I'm actually logged in using my environment and the similar interface that you saw and types of benefits. The same example that I keep on doing that, but you will see it's able to, come up with similar kind of references and solution that is there. This is the application where you will be able to then further change the UI, and it points to all the documents that are there. You can open a particular document and look at that. This is a very simple application compared to what I think Danshri was showing, which is a full-fledged demo that Microsoft provides, which has the thought process and everything else. But this is for you to start building your own enterprise solution. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions, but hopefully you got the sense of what we have been talking about on how to connect your enterprise data. More than happy to sort of talk more about that. We as a customer, we as a partner of Microsoft work with our customers. We are also actually proud to have been awarded the finalist category in the cloud native app development this year itself. And in fact, it was announced yesterday. So happy to work with any one of you for your needs as you're looking at Azure, AI, OpenAI, and any of those technologies to build your enterprise solutions.
Great. We do have a couple more questions that have come in to round out the session. The
Sure.
First one is, how do we choose which GPT model version to use for our solution?
In fact, that requires a long answer, but I will certainly give you a good perspective. Is every GPT model has different levels of capabilities, and based upon that, there is different levels of cost associated with how much does it cost for you to make APIs and what kind of a document processing it can do. In fact, if I go back to the same model environment that I was showing you, you have a GPT-4, which takes a 16K document as the maximum, but you also have a GPT-4 32K model, right, which can take a lot bigger documents for processing, but it costs a lot more also. So you have to make a choice between different models based upon some experimentation that you will do on what is going to meet your requirements in terms of the output. And you will be able to then, sort of look at the cost calculation. All these are published on the Microsoft website on APIs calls for this particular model. How much does it cost? And all of those. And the last one is, of course, as you saw, some limitations. Right, there is some limitations based upon the kind of infrastructure that is deployed behind these models, right, which is almost supercomputer level in infrastructure. That's where there are options available based upon the workload that you're deploying, how many queries will be coming in, what is the per query cost that you want to calculate, the capability itself, various criterias. And then, as I think you talked about it, you also have limits that you will need to manage through. So if you have different limits, for example, if you use GPT 3432, you can have 60 queries per minute, probably, right? So you'll have to be very careful about. I have actually two of them, so actually 30 plus each that it's providing me. And then you could, of course, in your scenario, if you see the link out here, request more quota. There will be a sort of a behind the work activity that will be done by the product team to enable it. It will cost more. So there are various criteria that we can chat about it. And that's one of the topics that we discover during our envisioning session. What is the scenario, and suggest to use certain specific approaches.
Great. The last question is, what type of controls can you enforce on the content being generated from GPT APIs?
Sure. Again, that's a topic for probably a different session altogether. Microsoft has been working in providing you this environment, right, as a playground. But there are also, additional security measures which is being put in. For example, I'll just show you content filter, where you can actually create your own custom filters, right, where you can actually define both what the user is inputting, if you want to control that, or what the model is outputting, you want to control that. Right? There are different levels that you can set up. You may say, I cannot do, it's a corporate environment. I will not allow any reference to any of these scenarios. And this is basically an add-on layer on top of the processing that is happening on your data, on your end users, which you can actually block the interactions that you want to provide. So there is more coming in this area. I believe we'll be covering it in a future webinar session. And if you're interested, happy to talk separately about it. But as Dhanshi showed one slide, you have data stored in your environment. You have the processing happening in your environment, your Azure environment, and now you have this additional capabilities where you can further secure even what is happening within your environment with the prompt that are being sent, with the results that are coming in for various types of AI ethics rules that you'll want to apply.
Okay, I believe that wraps up our Q&A for this session. Thank you very much for submitting your questions. And if you want to stay on top of the latest news and updates from Windwire, please head over to windwire.com, and you can follow us on our social channels as well. Thank you, Vineet and Dhanshi.
Thank you, everyone, again, for taking the time to join and listen to us. Hopefully, this was helpful. And we will look forward to in a future webinar to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.